Hello and welcome to Kindred. Welcome back, Jennifer, to another episode of the Kindred podcast. Thank you for joining us all today. I
Thank
welcome you
you
all.
for
My arms are
inviting us.
stretched out with
They sure
warmth
are.
and love.
Indeed.
I so appreciate our listeners. It kind of still, I pinch myself that people listen and care about these subjects that we care so much about. And it
Yeah,
just turns out if you love something, so do probably a couple other people.
it just turns out that way. There you go.
Yeah, I'm
hmm
grateful I live in that place. So,
hmm
okay. You know what here's the thing though. I do have a bone to pick with a few folks today, namely Disney, Ernest Hemingway, and Theodore Roosevelt. Can you guess one thing they all have in common about misrepresenting one of my favorite predators? Guess. Take three
What the
guesses.
predator is or what the thing in
Yes.
common is? Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
that's
I already
yes.
know what it is. Yeah, so I can
Yes.
guess.
Just say it out loud.
Hyenas.
Hyenas, that's right. And if you don't know what we're talking about, Google it because Ernest Hemingway really did write about hyenas in the worst way.
Yeah.
And I mean Disney because of like The Lion King, where they just were like made them the evil, cackling, stupid, grossest
But
animals. Like, why do they have
even
to be the
before
worst?
that, even
For
nature
sure.
programs, you see them like marauding around in their packs, and they kind of are like they kind of would portray
Yeah.
them as sort of like the nefarious pack of, ne'er-do-wells, I feel
Right.
like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even like just
That's
nature
true.
shows. Yeah.
That's actually true. Well, we are here to dispel all of those myths and misconceptions about hyenas, and I am here for it. You can't hear, but I'm banging on my desk because these animals are absolutely exceptional. But before we get into our episode today, we'd love to ask you to please consider supporting our podcast for the mere cost of a what?
Cup of coffee.
Yes, ma'am. So, other than subscribing via Apple Podcasts, we offer the option of donating to us through the app. It is an app, Buy Me a Coffee, which you can access via our website at kindredpodcast.co. This app offers you the option of making a one-time donation for the amount of from $5 or to whatever amount of cups you'd like to donate.
That's right.
I can't wait for they come a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. We've talked about this before. I
We
feel
have.
I feel not seen. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, thank you everyone so much for your consideration. And the other thing I'd like you to know is that if you don't remember, we offer a newsletter, and they're only in relation to our episodes, and you only will receive them every 2 weeks while we are dropping a season. So there's months where you won't get them. However, our newsletters are a great way to keep connected on the episodes. We talk about other stuff in the newsletter that's related to the episodes, but we offer, like articles and just different interesting stuff. So,
hmm
and sometimes we dig in deeper to our guests themselves. So if you want to sign up, again, head back to the kindredpodcast.co, our website, and sign up for the newsletter. All right. So let me introduce you to our guest today. So, today, like I said, we are going to be diving into all things hyenas. And to take us on this deep dive, we have asked hyena expert Dr. Kay Holekamp to educate us all about this amazing animal and talk to us about the 30 plus years of research and data her team has been collecting. So, to say she knows a few things about hyenas is the understatement of this century.
hmm
Let me give you a little short bio via her department at Michigan State University. Quote, Kay Holekamp, professor of biology, is recognized as one of the world's leading behavioral ecologists. Holekamp has devoted her career to animal behavior and behavioral neuroendocrinology, focusing specifically on the study of the evolution of intelligence. Her long running study of spotted hyenas in Africa, specifically Kenya, has acquired more than 30 years of data covering 10 generations of hyenas. Wow. Holekamp is a faculty member in the Department of Integrative Biology and is director of the Ecology, Evolutionary Biology and Behavior program at MSU, or Michigan State University. End quote. Um, I just want to mention too that Dr. Holekamp also leads the Mara Hyena Project based in Kenya at two locations, one based in the main reserve near Talek town, and the other is based in the Triangle near Serena Lodge. So, wow, what a privilege to have this person speaking with us today.
Yeah.
I mean, no one better. And it was such a joy to speak with her. I mean, we were all pretty much smiling the whole time, and just her brain is so packed with the most. And she just mentioned things kind of off the cuff, and literally listening back, it was such a joy to edit this because I was just like, I could listen to this one many times.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's head to Hyena Land and meet the chimera of the Masai Mara and get straight once and for all just how interesting and intelligent this species is. So, who's laughing now? Disney?
I see what you did
Yeah,
there.
girl. All right, everyone. See you at the takeaway. Okay, welcome to Kindred, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Sure. My name's Dr. Kay Holekamp. I'm a professor of integrative biology at Michigan State University. And for the last 30 some odd years, I have been studying spotted hyenas in Kenya.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This is such an honor and a pleasure, and we are awkwardly excited to talk about hyenas. And everyone, once we are done, you will know why. So thank you so much. It's a real honor and a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you.
One thing that motivates us to do this podcast is to dispel and replace myths and false narratives about animals with facts and science and learn from the people that actually know them. For centuries, many predators have been misunderstood and misrepresented to their absolute detriment. And it's time we stop handing over these false narratives and learn how amazing animals like the hyena actually are. And I blame Disney for this, maybe Theodore Roosevelt. And UK rightfully reminded me the last time we spoke, Ernest Hemingway. Let's add him to the list. Right?
Absolutely. Yes, there have been an awful lot of myths perpetuated around these particular animals.
Yeah. And I think if people don't know what we're talking about, think of the Lion King and the hyenas, and then just Google Roosevelt and Hemingway and just all in context to hyenas, and you'll see what we're talking about. So we are here to elevate and enlighten our minds about this amazing beast. So Kay, I'd love to hear about how you came to study hyenas. And when I was reading your bio on Michigan State University's website, a part jumped out at me, and it reads in part, Kay Holekamp, professor of biology, is recognized as one of the world's leading behavioral ecologists. Holekamp has devoted her career to animal behavior and behavioral neuroendocrinology, focusing specifically on the study of the evolution of intelligence. So that last bit is what got me. So my question to you is, what led you to study the evolution of intelligence, and how did this path lead you to researching 10 generations of hyenas and ultimately collecting 30 plus years of data?
Sure. I didn't anticipate that I would be doing this for this long. I went out to Kenya in 1988 thinking I would do a dissertation length project of 2 or 3 years and then move on to go study dolphins or monkeys or something else.
Ah,
But I went there to understand social development in spotted hyenas in the first place because one of my mentors from my PhD had set up a captive colony of hyenas while I was off doing postdoctoral research on squirrels, of all things. And
okay.
so I went up to have lunch with him one day, and he said, it's the strangest thing. Whereas in nature, female spotted hyenas are always socially dominant to males. In the captive environment, even though these animals are now fully adult, males are just as likely to dominate females as vice versa. And I said, yeah, that really is interesting. And he said, well, wouldn't it be cool for somebody to go out to the field and study social development and understand how these animals do come to dominate their male colleagues? And I
Right.
said, Wow. And he said, well, I thought you'd be a good person to do this. And I said, well, I've wanted to do something like that since I was about 6 years old. So where do I sign? I'm ready to go.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he said, oh, you just need to go get yourself an NSF grant and go do it. And wasn't that simple, but that is ultimately what happened. And I went out there, and then the animals turned out to be so weird and so interesting that I just got hooked, and I'm still studying them to this day.
So you
But
mentioned since six. So tell me more about your 6-year-old kid self. Well, what you always wanted to study hyenas?
no, I always wanted to study animal behavior, especially African
Oh.
animals. I grew up reading In the Shadow of Man by Jane Goodall and Ring of Bright Water
Ah,
about otters and the Elsa series by the Adamsons and all of those kinds of books. And I always thought that would just be the most wonderful life to lead.
Oh.
yes, agreed. I grew up reading National Geographic and things,
Wait,
and
when you say the Elsa series, is that the lion, Elsa?
Yeah, the lion.
Oh my gosh, what an inspiration that was, huh? Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
that's
that story.
right.
you know that
Okay.
story, Jen. That's
Oh,
one of
I
your
love that story.
favorites,
That's why I love lions, I think. Yeah.
right? Right. So, okay. So just going back a bit. So then, as like a child, then eventually here you are. But so, what was your first experience or encounter with hyenas like?
Well, that was one of the weirdest things because I was actually hitchhiking around the world with my husband, then husband. I'm now divorced, but we're still very good friends. And we stopped in East Africa for a little while because he knew that that was one place that I wanted to spend some time and actually look at animals and talk to people who study animals. And so we were in Ngorongoro Crater, and that's where we saw this group of hyenas run down this wildebeest. It was a long chase. It was an adult wildebeest. They killed it right next to our car.
Oh,
And
wow.
I turned to Rick and I said, wow, I thought those things were supposed to be skulking carrion eaters. And he
Hmm.
said, yeah, so did I. And they were spectacularly good hunters. And that really surprised me. So I went home and I read about them, but I never imagined I'd actually have an opportunity to work on them. And so this interaction with my former PhD mentor happened, a decade after that at least. And that's what got me going on the hyenas in the first place. But then, I anticipated that we would only be there for a few years at the outset, but then the animals turned out to be so weird and interesting. We came to understand how females come to dominate males
Yeah.
in a society,
Right.
and they inherit their mother's social ranks, and they keep those. Everybody keeps their ranks as long as they live in the natal clan. But most males disperse, as in most mammalian species. Spotted hyena males tend to disperse, and females don't. They're very home-loving, philopatric, and
Right, right, right. No, there are, we'll get into that. They really are truly fascinating. And so I just want to mention too that, was this all on like, you have, what's called the Mara Hyena Project, right? And that's on the Masai Mara area. Is this where you started all those years ago?
yes, I did. And I've been continually working in this same park without interruption for since May of 1988.
Oh,
So,
Wow.
incredible.
Now,
Okay.
is that typical that you get to stay somewhere that you get somebody does it for
no,
the same place?
no.
That seems atypical. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
most hyena studies. There have been two others that went on for periods of years, but most of them are just like a master's or a PhD thesis length project and just a couple of years, and then people write it up and move on.
Yeah.
And that's certainly what I thought I was going to do.
Yeah.
Right. Well, turns out not so much. And you have a whole crew. There's a whole lab, like you have a whole camp laboratory at MSU as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And also, I've now got a big staff of Kenyan employees and American students over there all the time. And
Okay.
um, so it's spiraled sort of out of control. It got to be a fairly big project.
Maybe not unlike hyenas, or just like there's a lot going on with them. So you need all this. Like there's this never ending. So I just want to like visit. I just want to stop for a second because I've been on safari and I've seen a wild hyena, one, I think a female out there, and it was incredible. But just talk to me a little bit about what's it like. What it is like just sitting in the bush watching these animals? Just set that scene for us a little bit.
Sure. What we discovered very quickly is we needed to basically operate on a split shift. So we get up in the dark and go out and find hyenas. Typically, some of them have radio collars, and that's how we find them in the dark most easily. We just have tracking units on our car and antennas on the roof. And so we go out in the dark and drive around, and then the sun's coming up. And so that's one of the periods of the day when they're socially most interactive, and there's a lot of stuff going on in hyena society early in the morning and right around sunset as well. So
Okay. So
yeah,
this is 24/7. You're 24 hours. You're during the day and during the night.
that's right.
Okay.
But we typically will be out in the cars just sitting, watching, and you can't study a large carnivore on foot for fear that it might decide it wants to eat you for lunch.
Yeah, right,
That's a
exactly.
really
Right.
good
Yeah.
point.
Smart.
You really have to be in a vehicle, and that's sort of a drag because you don't
Yeah.
get nearly as much exercise as you would
Yeah.
if you were walking around after monkeys.
Fair.
But anyway, so yeah, then we go out and spend about 3 hours in the morning, come back in, have breakfast, and work around camp all day, and then go back out around 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
And we literally will just find a group of hyenas, and depending on what's going on, just sit and watch them for sometimes hours on end. And
Amazing.
yeah, they're
Wow.
really fun to watch.
Wow. And you must have seen some story nights out there. Let me tell you, that African sky, there's nothing like it. So that's
Right.
incredible. That's incredible. Well, thanks for that. So as we're talking, Kay, obviously hyenas are absolutely fascinating animals, but there are just so many myths and misconceptions about them. So walk us through what makes them so remarkable, from their morphology and what they look like to their matriarchal clan structures, cognitive skills, and just what makes them exceptional.
Sure. I actually think there's a number of traits that hyenas exhibit that make them really fascinating, to me at least. And the most fundamental one is that they appear to violate a lot of the basic rules of mammalian biology. In most mammals, males are socially dominant to females. They're larger than females, they're better armed, they're more aggressive, and that whole scenario is flipped on its head in hyenas. So that's one of the most interesting things, where females are larger than males, more aggressive than males, and socially dominant to males.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, but also the reason for their female dominance, there are very few other carnivores where you see, females dominating males. And so I was always curious about why this should be the case. And the case has to do with another one of their really remarkable traits, which is that they're an interesting chimera in a number of ways, of both male and female traits, but also traits of bone cracking, carrion eating animals, where they've got a big, massive skull that allows them to break open bones, that are, 3 or 4 inches in diameter. I mean, it's quite extraordinary what they can break into.
Right. I mean, you think of what they're bringing down. These animals have giant femurs, right? I mean, those are big animals with big
Yeah,
bones.
a lot of the prey are big.
And
Exactly.
can you define chimera for us? You mentioned.
Yeah, chimera is sort of an interesting blend of traits of, in spotted hyenas, I see that females are exhibiting some totally typical mammalian female traits, like they're excellent moms. They take very good care of their babies. They're ever so gentle and patient with them.
Aw.
And yet then they also have these male-like traits where they're very aggressive, and they're just no nonsense kind of, they don't tolerate much guff from anybody who's lower ranking than they are, that's for sure.
Okay.
And so that blend of characteristics makes them really fascinating to me, because you just don't see that kind of situation in very many other mammals. But they do have this massive head that allows them to break open these large bones. But the trade-off involved in having such a powerful feeding apparatus, if you will, is that it takes a long time to develop. And I think that's the key to female dominance in spotted hyenas, where you have this weird set of traits where they're living in these complex, really competitive social groups. They're feeding on live prey that they kill themselves. And most people, by the way, think that hyenas are skulking carrion eaters, just like I used to think.
Yeah.
Until I saw them hunting. And people don't seem to understand that they're really very good cursorial hunters. They're no less successful in their hunts than our cheetahs or jaguars or lions, anything else.
Right.
So they're perfectly good at that.
Wow. So let's just talk about their morphology for a second too, because I find how they're made really fascinating. So we're going to talk about some adult words in this conversation, this part. Talk to me about their reproductive systems and behaviors.
Sure. Their reproductive anatomy is another one of the really interesting, weird traits about these animals, and that is The female's clitoris is enlarged. It's fully erectile. It looks exactly like the penis to the average person. And their vaginal labia are folded over and filled with connective tissue to form structures that look remarkably like the male scrotal sac. And so you
Wow.
see it and you just don't know what sex it is, just
Right.
off the top of your head. I mean, eventually you learn to look for secret little traits that allow you
Right.
to sex them. But wow, for hundreds of years they were thought to be both male and female at once because
That's
people
what I
could
had
see.
heard about them. I had
Yeah,
heard
that's
that
right.
they were both. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
people
Yeah.
thought they were
interesting.
hermaphrodites
Yeah.
for
Sure.
thousands of years, really.
Right.
And finally, somebody in the 19th century finally dissected one and realized, oh, internally they're pretty typical female mammals, except
Right.
that, instead of the vaginal canal exiting the body under the tail as it would in a dog or a cat, the reproductive tract makes a hairpin turn right in front of the tail and exits the body through this ridiculous 6-inch long phallus-like
Right.
clitoris. And so
Amazing.
they're the only mammal out there that has no external vaginal opening. And so they just have this one tube that traverses this strange organ, and they urinate and copulate and give birth through that thing. So it's really quite unusual.
Well, and I also
Yes.
think this is partly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my first thing was this is also part of why they're so in charge of when they reproduce and who they reproduce with. Like they have full um access and control of these mechanics, and they produce them, protract them, all these different things, and they don't have to reproduce if they don't want to. And they're set up for that too, which I just thought like those two kind of things evolutionarily were so fascinating to me. And so I don't think
Well,
I've ever heard this before.
when we talked about seahorses, that's more like a seahorse than
Right.
so that's what I
Right.
was thinking. Or I was thinking like of a praying mantis. Like I'm thinking of other species that have these bigger female than male, but these are mammals. It's like,
Yeah.
what is happening? Yeah,
Right.
it's so weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. And
that's correct.
again, this is probably why people are so confused about them. These animals are weird and they're male, but like we don't understand them. And then they got even more, but I thought that was really incredible. So tell me a little bit more about what kind of mothers they are. You had mentioned that.
Yeah, they're really fabulous mothers. I mean, there's a variety of different maternal styles that they adopt, like in any species, but they're always just amazingly patient and gentle with their kids, and they tolerate other kids when they're lying at a den. That's where all the mothers bring their cubs to a communal den. Any cub that's less than about a year old, they keep at a communal den where the
Oh,
mothers come a couple of times a day to nurse them, and otherwise the kids stay underground to protect themselves from lions and so forth.
okay.
Mm. Yeah, so um, they're lying around, they're trying to nurse their own cubs, and meanwhile, other cubs are bouncing around and chewing on their ears and pulling on their tails, and they're just amazingly patient and cool with that. And that's always impressed me because, boy, they're totally intolerant with anybody messes with their food supply.
Yeah.
They're very aggressive.
Yeah. So then what's the hierarchy within this clan? Like are there yearlings with them, and who kind of ranks higher, or what's the ranking below her, I should say?
Well, the clan is structured by every hyena clan is structured by a linear dominance hierarchy, and your position in that hierarchy determines your priority of access to important resources like food. And so, females can dominate males, and what happens is that all the males, when they come into a new clan, since they're all changing places, they're all typically moving from their natal clan to a new one before they breed. And
Okay.
I think that's because the females in their natal clan are disinclined to mate with a male they've grown up with.
Sure.
But when they disperse, in order to gain entry into a neighboring clan, they have to behave obsequiously to pretty much anybody they encounter. And that means even tiny cubs. So you can see little tiny cubs dominating these fully adult males.
Oh,
And
wow.
any natal animal, regardless of its size, can dominate these immigrant males. And
Interesting.
so the males really, it's not a good place to be in hyena society. You don't want to be a male because life is
Interesting.
very hard for you.
And so are the adult males looking to breed like loners, or will they just kind of hang out by these dens and cross their fingers and hope and look real handsome?
Well, they don't actually, they're not allowed very close to dens pretty
Okay.
much ever, but they, if females are out just, resting or feeding, the males will come up and try to introduce themselves, and they try and develop a friendship, if you will, with each female. And that's what is the key to mating success in these animals, rather than males fighting with one another like you see in lions, for example,
Mhm.
or other mammals.
Oh, that is fascinating. So they're not necessarily in competition with each other. There might be a couple males hanging around. They're just like, I just gotta focus on her and be real nice and patient.
Yeah, that's typically it. And the average male who immigrates into a clan will have to hang out for at least a couple of years at the very bottom of the hierarchy before he ever gets to mate at all. So it's
I was going to ask
it's
that.
a
Yeah.
long queue. You have to be very patient
And one
male.
other
Wow.
question is, so if this say, does a male have to start with the alpha female, and if he gets her consent, does everyone else have to kind of agree, or how does that work?
No, he has to develop these relationships individually. So,
Okay.
yeah, they definitely somehow can discern which females are higher ranking than others, and they
Okay.
prefer to hang out with the higher ranking ones. And
Okay.
that's very wise on their part, because the offspring of the high ranking females are going to survive a lot better than the offspring of low ranking females,
Right.
because they're going to have better access to food.
Right.
So yeah, we don't understand how the males know the female ranks, but they're very discriminating, and they'll try and develop relationships with females even before they start breeding. And so they're just behaving in a very nervous but friendly way towards these females, and sort of
Wow.
approaching them and then backing up a little bit and approaching again, backing up again. It's really fun to watch their courtship behavior because the males are so nervous.
Amazing.
Female
Now,
can do a lot of
how
damage.
how do females sort of cycle up and down? Like there's one top female, but then there's other females growing up. They're going to be top females at some point. How do they figure out who stays queen bee?
Well, the ranks are inherited, so they're passed. There's no literal inheritance.
Oh,
So
interesting.
there's not genes determining this, but it's a learning process that takes place while they're still living at the communal den when they're still only a few months old. They
Wow.
learn very quickly, who their mothers can dominate, and then they come to behave aggressively to all those animals who their mothers can dominate, and they learn that they're going to get hammered if they attack somebody who's higher ranking than they are.
That's
So
fascinating. That's so
yeah.
unusual too.
It
Wow.
is very unusual, yeah, but it's
Wow.
the reason that we got involved in the study of the evolution of intelligence in the first place is because all these processes, the way the societies are structured by linear dominance hierarchy, how they learn their ranks and so forth, all of that is remarkably like what you see in baboons or a lot of old world monkeys.
Mhm.
And so that's what really started us thinking about, well, the primatologists were very worried about the evolution of intelligence. And so we started thinking, well, if their hypotheses are correct about the evolution of intelligence, then we ought to see the same sorts of
Hmm.
traits in hyenas as we see in monkeys. And so we started testing their intelligence way back in the late 1990s, and have been continuing to do that ever since. And turns out that they're really pretty smart.
Mm.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, what a species to study. Um, and okay, so now that we are much more familiar with hyenas, let's dig into your work and the research your lab has been doing and why. Talk to us about how the study of behavioral neuroendocrinology intersects with these social behaviors and reproduction and socio-ecological forces, and just how it all contributes to the survival and overall success of the hyena.
Well, their endocrinology in particular is of interest to people because of the strange sexual reversals that we see with females dominating males, females being more
Okay.
aggressive than males, and females having this male-like external genitalia. So, for a long, long time, like I'd say since the turn of the century at least, everyone has assumed that females are just exposed to androgens when they're developing, and that's what causes them to develop this strange external genitalia and strange behavior. And it does affect the behavior, but the genitalia, it turns out, can actually develop in the complete absence of any kind of male hormone. So this is something that's programmed their genetics rather than requiring some sort of hormonal input to make happen. So, people had thought for a while that spotted hyenas would make a good model system to understand what happens in anomalous human pregnancies where the mother's adrenal glands or some other endocrine organ will secrete too much male hormone like androgens, testosterone and androstenedione, those kinds of hormones. But it turns out that my colleagues at UC Berkeley did an experiment where they took all the androgens out of the system completely by feeding their hyenas anti-androgens throughout pregnancy, and their female offspring still grew up with these bizarre, enormous genitalia, just like a male. So that had nothing to do with it, as it turns out.
Wow, so genetic, not that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. But he's got fabulous video footage of a female hyena who's been treated with these anti-androgens while she's developing, and whereas an untreated female will not tolerate a male feeding anywhere near her. It's very aggressive to any male animal that comes close to her, anybody lower ranking for that matter. And these anti-androgen treated females are just they glance up when a male comes over to feed within a body length of them, and that's the extent of it. They don't behave aggressively. It's like a whole new animal. It's been crazy.
Whoa,
It's really
that
crazy.
that is crazy. And you were saying earlier that these hyenas are constantly doing things that surprise you, but that is really fascinating. So
Yeah.
then how, and you had mentioned just before sort of rating their intelligence, like how do you rate the intelligence or like cognitive abilities of hyenas?
Well, it depends sort of what kind of cognitive abilities you're talking about. We've adopted a number of different approaches, and what the primatologists had a very popular hypothesis to explain the evolution of intelligence, which suggests that if you're living in a complex social environment, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the evolution of your brain. And the animals who have the bigger brains that can figure things out more quickly and anticipate or perhaps even manipulate the behavior of their group mates would have a huge fitness advantage. And so we've been testing that hypothesis in hyenas and over since the late 1990s. And what we found is that pretty much any social intelligent feat that a primate can accomplish, hyenas can accomplish too. So there are certain questions we can't address with them as easily as you can in a primate. So we haven't done it yet. But everything that we've asked of them, saying, okay, monkeys can do this. Can you do this too?
Wow.
And yes, they can. So
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 give
we
us
learned.
an example of what that looks like. Like what's a test?
Okay. Well, the primatologists, two primatologists, Dorothy Cheney and Robert Seyfarth, had done an experiment back, they published in 1980, where they had asked vervet monkeys, can a mom recognize the voice of her youngster and discriminate it from the voice of other youngsters? And so they played alarm calls back to the mother, and they found that, yes, not only can mothers identify their own offspring, but everybody else in the social group knows that that mom goes with that cub, that voice.
Wow.
So
Oh,
they'll
wow.
look at the mother when they hear the voice of this particular cub. And so we recorded cub distress vocalizations in the hyenas and played those back to mothers. And yeah, they certainly know their own cubs' voices from and can discriminate those from others. And so, you just do a playback experiment to ask that kind of question.
Wow. So this is really changing our idea of who is in is intelligent and what is intelligence, right? I mean, this is really stretching those because we think, well, anything that's close to us, which primates are, they're our cousins. Well, they're super duper smart because they're a lot like us. Hyenas are nothing like us, and yet they're exhibiting intelligence the same as it's this problem solving, but also it just shows you how much they have already, the knowledge and understanding and connection they have to to everything. I mean, it's like they're as smart as primates then.
Yeah, in the social domain, they are. They tend to be able to do any kind of social intellectual feat a primate can do. But when it comes to the domain of non-social intelligence, that's where we see a big difference. The hyenas are fairly rigid in their thinking, and the
Okay.
hy the monkeys are very plastic and they're very curious about their world, so that they'll, you know, open things up and prod things and poke things and just
Mhm.
try everything. And the hyenas are more nervous about novel things of that sort. And in
Right.
fact, if they were smarter and could recognize that they're looking in these little canvas screen boxes that we all sleep in the bush at night, that, we're perfectly good food. And if we were out
Mhm.
walking around in the bush at night, the hyenas wouldn't hesitate to eat us. But
Right.
we're in these little canvas boxes. And, if a baboon walks by and sees an apple on your bed, they know that's food. I'm going in and getting it. And they just burst right through the screen, which a hyena
Yeah.
could easily do.
Right.
But they don't. They don't. They just seem to can't think outside that canvas box, if you will, and not
Interesting.
recognize you as food. It's funny.
Well, Jen, it makes me think about that years ago when I think I'll say to Jane, this is Jane Goodall, correct me if I'm wrong, where it's like we see gorillas using a tool, a blade of grass to stick down into the hole of an ant hill, and they pull it out and then they eat the ants off that. Like that's a different type of cognitive ability or intelligence.
That,
However, a hyena doesn't or can't do that, but maybe because they don't need to. They don't need to do that in their brains just because they're not set up in that sort of, they don't have that necessarily the curiosity. And I'm thinking of dolphins as well, who are also very curious and problem solvers, but they don't have fingers. So they're not going to do things like I can unlock the lockbox of food because but it doesn't mean that, again, it's changing our idea of what intelligence means.
yeah, that's exactly right. So that, yeah, hyenas don't have any need to use tools because their mouth is effectively a whole toolkit,
Yeah,
you know,
right. Uh-huh. Hmm.
crushing tools in there and slicing tools and all
Yeah.
kinds of things. So they don't need to be able to use tools like so many primates do, where that ability helps them survive and reproduce.
Right.
Right.
Hyenas don't need it. Right, exactly.
which is which is just it. I'm sitting here for a minute just because I think it's another way that we need to expand our minds, our human minds, about looking at another species, another mammal, and really asking the question of what does this mean? How does it apply to us in a sort of humble way? And Kay, hearing about this exceptional animal and all just this incredible research you're doing, I am left thinking about how maligned hyenas have been. And it kind of gets me to that heart space of it's really heartbreaking to think about how misrepresented they have been, especially knowing how hard it is just to survive out there on the savannah, right? It's absolutely beautiful, and it's also brutal. And the last thing a mother hyena needs is just this human sort of persecution on top of it all. And, I'm thinking of the human wildlife conflict. But my question for you is, how can we humans change our contemptuous minds about predators like the hyena or any animal that we deem ugly or evil or cowardly, especially in this context, with just no intelligence or deep care of their own?
Yeah, well, I think it's an important question, and it's a major problem because there's a lot of conflicts all over the African continent between the remaining large carnivores that live there and the local people. Anybody who's trying to raise livestock, for example, finds their livestock are at risk
Yeah.
of depredation by hyenas or lions or leopards or whatever creatures are around. And what people don't come to understand, I think, are the ecosystem services that these animals actually provide.
Right.
Spotted hyenas, for example, that live in there, they inhabit these urban areas in northern Ethiopia, where in a city of 300,000 people, the hyenas take away over 200 tons of rubbish every
Yeah.
year.
Hmm.
They just make it vanish, and by taking out all the offal, the remains of livestock that are slaughtered in this city, and that's a lot. They're actually saving people the risk of getting anthrax or tuberculosis because hyenas can ingest those things and not even experience indigestion, whereas they
Right.
kill a human.
Yeah.
So they're really doing a lot of important ecosystem services that people just don't ordinarily think about.
That is so important to talk about their contribution to the ecosystem that they live within, and they're just behind the scenes doing this work that is truly keeping our world clean. And we talk
Right.
about this all the time. These all kinds of Jen, we're just talking about a guy about possums, like cleanup crew in aisle one, right? Like these are the animals that keep us healthy And
Right.
it's why I don't have 14,000 deer carcasses in my yard from cars hitting them, right? I mean, this
Well,
is
right. And I was thinking not just on the savannah in the open plains, but actually where people live, they're actually providing that service. Like that's where we're so short-sighted a lot of times as human beings and just they look kind of creepy, so we don't like them. They have this weird kind of cackle, it's kind of scary, so they must be bad.
right,
They're not as beautiful as a leopard or whatever. And
right.
that's it just gets so boring and old that it's just, oh, because of how they look.
So
That's
boring
why
and
we don't
old.
like them because of how they look. They have
Yeah,
weird
no,
big ears, they
they
have
really
weird, yeah, this, but
exactly. They are very
it's
weird. They don't look like they're going to be good predators, but they are.
yeah,
And so, you just have to watch them for a while to really develop a new admiration and respect for them.
yeah, that's usually the case. We just have to learn more. It's not their fault, it's our fault. It's on us.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I do think it really is time to shift these narratives. And so what other major contributions are they making?
Well, they're the main cleanup crew in all these African ecosystems because they occur in the driest deserts. They occur in, the Okavango Delta, which is a big giant marsh, if you will. Anyway, they just occur all over the place, and their
Right.
density varies with how much food is around. So when there's a lot of food, they're very dense, as they are in the plains of Eastern Africa and in the deserts of the southwestern part of the continent. They live in tiny little groups, only have 10 or 11 hyenas in them. So
Mm.
they're very variable in that respect.
Wow. So they're just keeping all of these systems clean, like, water systems and all these different things. They're just truly like, if that's that's enough. They don't have to have any other. That's a big contribution.
Well, they do, but they also regulate, the populations of animals lower down in food pyramids than
Right.
they are. So they're performing important ecological services there as well. But
Right.
I just think the cleanup function is phenomenal because
Yeah.
people have just recently started quantifying it, and just to see that they're removing over 200 tons
That's
of
a lot. Yeah.
of offal per year. Holy cow, that
Yeah.
is really a lot. Yeah.
That is really a lot. And I think that's where can we look at these animals as our equals in the contribution they're making to bettering the planet. We do the opposite. We're
I was going to
just
say they're not our equals because they're doing more than we are doing.
I
fair.
would think
That's fair.
so.
That's fair. And I think this is where talking about species like hyenas is just so important. Because we need them for our survival. We need them for our species to thrive. And I think people, and like Jen said, we say this a lot, but it really is so boring. This just like, oh, they're gross and they're cowardly and they're whatever. And look at their like, but. It's like, okay, let's just not do that anymore because it couldn't be more wrong. And actually, how much can we relate to them? And we love wolves here. And I feel like they are our counterpart. They're our equal. They are us in animal form and vice versa. Like we're so like them. And like, oh, it's a terrible way that hyenas and wolves bring down their prey. Well, left to what am I going to do? Just I'm throwing spears at them. What's the difference here? I like anyway. So I really I love this conversation and the whole dispelling of it. And from your perspective, Kay, why is this conversation so important? Like, why do we need to talk about these animals and emphasize why they're so important? Like, what's the main thing for you?
Well, my big concern is that as the human population of the planet continues to expand, the place in the world for wild animals is shrinking phenomenally. And what I see happening in Africa and also in the States to some extent, but a lot in Africa, is that the the areas that have been set aside as parks and reserves are also being used by local people as commons for grazing their livestock. And so you're seeing more and more conflicts between, if you bring the cows and sheep into the place where the hyenas are living, then they're going to go after your cows and sheep because they're a lot easier to kill than a
Right,
wild
Yeah,
herbivore.
right.
right.
So, and then the local people get mad, and then they put out a carcass that's saturated with insecticide poison, and we've lost as many as 25 hyenas in a morning.
Oh,
So,
Oh,
it's just from these mass poisoning events. It's terrifying, and then we have to watch all their cubs starve to death because of.
oh,
golly.
Anyway, it's really heartbreaking, and And that's getting to be a bigger and bigger problem as the human population, on that continent at least continues to expand.
Okay. Well, that's good to know those things are still happening. And that is, it's why we want to talk about this stuff with people like you who actually can expand our minds and really dig into like how terrible that is on so many different levels because you're intimate with these animals. You in a sense of like you've shared a lot of time and space and you love them. You love them.
I do love them actually, and people think I'm sort of crazy to love them, but I do. I think they're just cool as can be.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that's where I find that really inspiring and I can see in your face and hear in your voice how much you care and we really appreciate well just years and years and years I do think what an amazing life you've had to spend to have this time out there and just the experiences that you what's one story that kind of comes to mind as like a favorite where you're like oh my gosh that's life changing for or just blows your mind.
Well, I must say, I'm not supposed to have a favorite hyena, but I do have a favorite hyena. Her name was Cochise.
Hmm.
And she was just really fun because she was so brave and so curious and she was smart. She figured out very quickly that she could kill a gazelle or whatever and bring it over and put it down right against the tire that's right below my driver's seat. And then she could very carefully snip off each horn and have a whole slew of other hyenas standing 10 feet away, all too scared to come in and contest that carcass with her. So she'd get to eat the whole gazelle because she was smart.
Amazing. Well, and how long did you observe her for? How long did she live?
Let's see, I'd say she lived for the first 10 years of our study.
Oh,
Mm.
wow.
Then a lion killed her, of course. Lions kill a lot of hyenas.
Mm.
Okay. Well, that's an honest way to go. 10 years is a good long life, right? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can we find your work? Like, what's your website or any kind of like social media at all?
Yeah, I do have a website. It's if you just Google K Holekamp or Holekamp Lab, then it comes up right away.
Okay.
Uh, and that's got all this information about hyenas and so forth on it. But there was a great article in National Geographic in the March 2024 issue where these people really went out of their way to get their facts straight about hyenas. And I think that's if you want to
Mm.
study about, what we know about their biology and their intelligence, that's a good place to start.
Absolutely. And we know that article and we love that article and we will link that in the show notes of this episode. Um, that's amazing. And so are you active on social media then?
I have a Facebook account, and an Instagram account, but I don't post things very
No,
often.
that's fair enough. But
Fair enough.
if you Google you'll find you very quickly, everyone. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And just one last question: can we visit the Masai Mara lab there? Is that do you host tourists or guests?
Well, we don't I mean we had to declare to the Kenyan government many years ago whether we were sort of a tourist organization or a scientific research organization, and we definitely don't want to be recognized as a research organization.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people can certainly come visit and they can stay at our camps, but they do have to pay the park fees, which are pretty high these days.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's interesting. That just might be we're Jen and I are accruing quite a list on the continent, but we'll just have to start north and work our way down. So from cheetahs to hyenas and beyond. So Kay, thank you so much for your time. What an absolute pleasure to speak with you. This was super enlightening, and I can't wait to listen back and just soak in all of the information that you gave us. It's incredible. So thank you. What an honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the takeaway. So I would encourage people to listen to this episode twice. I mean, just for me, like
It
listening
was
back
packed
and
with information. Yeah.
there were just a couple things that I missed a little bit, just because I was so focused on her, and then she would just go from one amazing fact or study to the next, and I just was like amazed.
30 years of information she downloaded to us.
I mean, we just hit the edge of all of this. So there's two things I really want to focus on. The first one, though, I kind of want to just sort of dig into, how, so Kay was talking about how her and her lab focuses on the evolution of intelligence, right? So I just found that so incredible that led her to then studying hyenas. And one of the reasons she was saying, if I'm right, was when she was talking about linear dominance hierarchy, which is the system that hyenas and their clans operate within. And let me just give a quick definition of that again. So a linear dominance hierarchy is a social ranking system where each individual consistently dominates those below them and is a subordinate to those above them, creating a clear linear order from highest to lowest ranking. So like if A dominates B and B dominates C, then A also dominates C. And it's like this sort of idea of a pecking order.
Right.
However, I find it incredible, and so does Kay and her people, that this is how this plays out in this complex social environment that they have. Is just incredible to me. And she was saying how even like within the structure, they all know how this plays out. They all know from a little pup that, because she was saying a grown male who's sort of hanging out on the edges trying to get in with the top female to mate, and they're there for a couple years. Even like a little cub knows that it is dominant to this male, this grown male. So if a cub can dominate that animal, and
because they're the alpha or whatever, they're above. Yeah, that they all know that. Yeah,
that's right.
It's so unusual. Yeah,
so unusual. And also the fact that she's like, I think she said they're not sure exactly how they figure this out, but males also observe and watch, for she said up for a couple years before they get a chance to, if the female so chooses, to mate with them. Right. And you and I were just kind of blown away about how unique this is. And she said that over and over again, like they're exceptional in these ways. So, and I just thought, I just didn't realize that and she was saying that the complex social environment is exceptional with hyenas, and just how that, to me, these two things combined are like how hyenas excel and are considered superior and on a level of intelligence compared to primates, not the same. Right. Like they can't use tools and problem solve in the same way. But my point was, why do they don't have to? Right. Yeah. And we need to change our human perspective of what is intelligent and extremely intelligent, right? And I said, well, they don't need to use a knife and fork because they just chomp through these bones. They're set up to not. Right. But I just thought that was so amazing.
Yeah. And so so complicated. That's why she said part of the reason she's been studying them for 30 years. She did not expect that would be what happens, but because it is so complex. Right. And there's things they don't understand. And how the males, those males hanging out sort of, in a very submissive way, like, hey, girl, like,
still here.
They just have to be really kind of very, not too pushy. They really have to bide their time and just, the females are the ones making all the choices, and it's just really interesting.
Right. I mean, and let's not forget the anatomy of a hyena, a female hyena, is just like blows your mind. And I just thought, I don't know, this is just where, again, I'd love to do more episodes about the intelligence of animals, because I think that we need to change our perspective of what super smart is type idea. Not only this, she was talking about their contribution to ecosystem services. And she said hyenas clean up in and around 200 tons of offal in cities per year. So not only are they cleaning up carcasses like around Africa, it's not just in Kenya, but they're also going into cities and where there's like butchers. So you butcher the animal for what you want and you throw away all the other junk. The hyenas go into cities and clean that up too.
Yeah, that's the only thing she was counting in the 200 tons too, which I didn't understand at first. I thought she was just meaning per year, hyenas on the earth clean up 200 tons of dead stuff. Nope, that's not what she meant. So
that's
just to think about that, how people directly benefit from that, so we don't have, whatever kinds of disease and maggots and disgusting things from just dead animals lying around the city. That's what
totally. And then, of course, there's the whole human wildlife conflict within that space and even out and, with farmers and things like that. Because we're encroaching on their space.
Exactly.
It's just so important. I think, again, my main takeaway really is, can we change our, like I said in the episode, our contemptuous minds about animals that we just don't understand and that are really let them do their job. And we are thriving and not as diseased as we would be because of them.
Right. Yeah.
And the fact that they're just so persecuted and people said they're ugly and they're disgusting. It's just like, not what you say, like you don't understand. So thank you so much to Kay for being with us today. And I can't wait to listen back to this episode. Please, you can find Kay and her research through the Holekamp Laboratory website, which is holekamplab.org. So it's HOLEKAMPLAB.org, or through the Michigan State University's website, msu.edu. And then please follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And so where, you can follow all of our promotions of this episode and all of the Kindred episodes, actually. So again, I would love to get her back on and just dig into some other stuff. Just incredible.
Yeah. She's a wealth of knowledge, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think too, I'll just end with a thought. Like, I was like, you really love these animals. And she's like, yeah, I'm not really supposed to. And people think I'm weird that I do. But I'm like, I'm sorry. No, you're not weird. And two, how can you not? And just the years, of like the nighttime observations and just her years of, it just was, it was really cool to see her like just genuinely like has a deep respect and understanding and just a love for this animal.
Right. And 30 years later, she still loves doing the work. That's the cool thing. Like, she loves her job and she can't wait
feel
to
like,
get
she
back
just
to
wants
that.
to kind of live with them always,
Right.
Don't you? I don't know.
Yeah.
I totally relate. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening and lots of love. Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen, produced by Kat Gaddy and myself, sound production and editing by Dan Cooper, original music by Ellie Grace, and our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website at kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find details about Kindred Plus, our subscription service, as well as links to our social media accounts and show notes.